in terms
Hmm.
that,
Yeah.
yeah,
Very good.
We had people.
Okay, we are recording, and then we're live on Facebook. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, yes, we can.
Yes.
And
Okay.
Presentation mode, it's all good.
Perfect. Yeah, it was a good one. Babu, we need. I asked for Mark Garrison to give us the recording.
Yeah, he sent it this morning.
He did.
Yes.
Okay, I have to check my email then to see
Yeah,
if it came through.
But it was interesting. Even people from University of Warwick joined the call yesterday. I got a message on LinkedIn because University of Warwick has been running a center like IndustryX for 40 years. The founding director, the professor, is inducted into the House of Lords in UK and all that. But a professor joined the call yesterday, and he was saying it was very interesting. So we had a lot of people from industry that joined the call yesterday. Yeah, so
good.
And yeah, I mean, what they showed in terms of lights out factories, they really showed lights were out. All the robots were running and everything was going on. There were no lights. In fact, it was in darkness inside the factory. And they showed the video of all the stations doing their work because they believe to compete in a high wage market like the US, they came up with a solution which had 90% less workers on the floor. Whereas their Taiwan and Chinese facilities are fully, manual. Not fully manual, a lot more manual activity. They said 90% less workers in the US.
Babu, we are starting now.
Okay.
Okay. Welcome everyone. My name is Noman. I welcome everyone to this the sixth session of our IndustryX Data Science and Analytics Thought Leadership webinars. Today we're talking about leading with context from problem formulation to the last mile. And as usual, we have our expert panel. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So starting with Babu. Go ahead, Babu.
Yeah. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Ratna Babu Chanam, Professor and Chair for the Industrial and Systems Engineering Department at Wayne State. And I also direct the AI Big Data and Analytics Group at Wayne State and also a co-founder for IndustryX.
Nabil.
Good morning. My name is Nabil Raj. I'm with GM Financial. I'm the VP of Data Science, and I've been involved throughout my career in developing and launching various analytics groups across the globe, and I'm happy to be part of this discussion.
Thank you, Nabil. And Brett.
Sure. So my name is Brett Vermette, and I'm part of the GM team, and my role here at GM is being responsible for our big data infrastructure and our platform engineering work that we do around big data and high performance compute. And I've been in and around GM for almost my entire career, and largely in a data or analytics background in space as well.
We appreciate both, especially Nabil and Brett. They have been with us in this program from the very inception of this webinar series. And there's a lot of insights they've brought to these programs. So if you like to look at the programs before this, session 1 through 5, there either you can visit industryx.org, go to our LinkedIn page or Facebook page. You can see these recordings. So just a quick intro about IndustryX. IndustryX is a center of operational excellence at Wayne State University. And our whole mission is to drive and promote excellence, operational excellence, and the advancement of operational excellence in industry. And as we know that the industry is changing very fast, and productivity has been stagnant for so many years, there is a need, and there's a need for to focus on operational excellence with advanced technologies and AI and other industry 4.0 tools. So this is what we do. We work with companies, we collaborate with industry, we provide leadership opportunities for students to work with us. We work with industry professionals, and we work in 4 key areas. One of the key pillar of our work is R&D Alliance, where we work with industry and advancing research. Second one is labs, where we promote experimentation and interaction and experiential learning through these labs. Number 3 is the workforce development. And the last one is thought leadership, promote thought leadership. This is what we're doing. And just want to give you an idea, just yesterday, we had a meeting with Foxconn, where they came to this platform at Wayne State, and they talked about some of their technologies, and working closely with us to advance technology. So if you are interested to work with us, if you're interested to reach out to us, feel free to work with us, and we're very happy to work with you. So with this, let's start this program. Data science and analytics projects, like many projects, they have a lot of issues from the inception to the last mile, what we call. And this program is designed and to discuss some of these issues. So first, I'm going to start with Nabil, that from your experience, that what is this last mile problem in data science projects?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Noman. You know, that last mile is really, it's all about recognition of value. And to recognize the value, it is a change in behavior. So that last mile, we tend to think a lot about the technology that's involved to launch a project and deploy it in production. To me, the technical aspect is probably the simpler challenge, if you will. The tough challenge is recognizing the value. Just because you've launched an analytical capability, it doesn't mean that it's going to be used to its fullest potential. And you know, oftentimes stakeholders, even from the very beginning, when they ask for a particular capability, they may not necessarily be aware of how it is going to change people's jobs. So, you know, oftentimes it's about the job redesign. It is a change in behavior. It is a change in how decisions are made. And these aspects, they tend to be recognized at the end. They tend to be recognized as a reaction to something that you've put in production. And that's when the lack of alignment on expectations typically surface. And so we argue that the need to actually align and stay aligned starts at the very beginning, recognizing that not everything can be flushed out at the very beginning, but it's a process of clarifying expectations, managing change throughout every step of the data science process.
Okay. So in terms of this issue, Brett, in your experience, this is an issue which is connected to data science, and how does this issue is becoming more prominent in our implementation process?
Yeah, there's a few things, right? And I think Nabil touched on one of the key things about recognition of value in that last mile being more retrospective than it is forward looking, right? It's not until you arrive at the end of the project that people start to think about what the value proposition has really been. And that makes it particularly problematic to justify the inception or a launch of a particular data science or analytics project, because you have to have that trust. And that's particularly important in the early phases when a company starts to shift to a data orientation, and there is less of a, I would say, an entrenched understanding of what the value propositions really can be and the potential of these projects and the potential of mining out your data and driving better decisions for the company. Over time it gets better. And Noman, to your question, really, it's becoming more prominent because our industries and our approach to business is shifting to a data orientation. And we're seeing, at least from my vantage point, analytics and data science being mainstream in more and more business processes. And the more pervasive that becomes, the more ubiquitous analytics and data-driven decisions become, the more impactful that problem becomes in a company moving forward, right? And the world is moving. Data availability is improving. To your point, I think that you made earlier as well. The technical side of things is, or maybe it was Nabil that said this. The technical side of things is it's a challenge, but it's a more well-solved challenge. It's the behavioral side and the cultural side of things that sometimes are problematic. And used to be in the R&D department, and then it was in the department that your data and analytics department. Well, there is no data and analytics department in many companies anymore. It's a part of every department, and so then that becomes more pervasive, and you see these challenges becoming more impactful across the whole breadth of a business, right?
Right. It's interesting that everybody at this time, in this age you're living, we all understand that data science analytics is key to winning in this market. But still, people are not willing to take this journey, and they're not willing to take these bold decisions, or even a decision to move forward in this journey. Babu, what is your thought on this, and why is this particular issue of data science still, people, even though from one side people know that this is important, from the other side they're not doing it?
Great question, Noman. So clearly in the last couple of webinars, we did talk about lack of awareness, right? In particular, in many of the established industries, there is still not good awareness around what is possible through analytics. That is the main problem, in my opinion, right? I mean, senior management in many companies, maybe not the GMs of the world and the GM financials of the world, but if you talk about a firm with 200 employees or 500 employees or 1,000 employees, a lot of these companies simply don't have much of an understanding for what is data science, what is analytics, what can they do with the infrastructure that they have, what kind of data is available for them, what kind of expertise do they need within the firm to be able to, start this journey. But in terms of coming back to this last mile problem, great comments by Nabil and Brett, but I will take a slightly different perspective. Often the last mile problem has to do with, besides, culture, change management, things of the sort, there are also issues around the robustness of the solution. Currently I'm working with a company that is in the business of providing decision support platforms for automotive dealerships, right? There are tens of thousands of dealerships. What we noticed is at the beginning of COVID, right? A lot of these recommendation systems tend to look at who is doing well, right, within the industry, and what are their practices, and what is the signature, and how do we generate effective recommendations for others. What we noticed is that these recommendation platforms were recommending a lot of excess inventory because that is what they're seeing with across the industry. Not recognizing that there is a change point, something happened, disturbed the markets, products are not being sold, customers are not visiting dealerships and things of that sort. And the system didn't experience anything of the sort, right, in the recent past. So the models did not handle these change points and are providing recommendations that are not appropriate. So this notion, at the bottom of the slide, you have this notion of solution robustness. It's not about the solutions working well on a good day. The question is, in the presence of turbulence and uncertainties in the marketplace, how well can the solutions, provide robust decision support? So that is also quite a challenge. And that is a little more of a technical challenge, and it has to do with also truly, working with the client organization and understanding the full complexity of the problem, so that solutions can be developed to be robust.
Yeah, Dr. Chinam, if I may interject here, I think that is an excellent point. I think it is a key challenge that I personally have experienced in many different settings and projects. And that is, oftentimes when we launch a new initiative or a new model or a new analytical capability, it's not without any limitations. It has some it's not perfect, basically. And I think sometimes the business stakeholders are not aware of their role in making that solution better, right? So if we set expectations that say, well, here's a solution for you, use it, and we're giving you all the answers, that doesn't really work, because any solution has to evolve, any solution has to become more robust over time. And I think what's missing is an understanding of the role of the business in providing that feedback and being engaged and being partners in making analytics better, which I don't think they necessarily see themselves typically as playing in that role.
Great point. Okay.
No, I think it's both Nabil and Babu, these are good points. But there's a space which is maybe the GMs of the world or the companies who understand and they're investing heavily in this. But then there's a huge space out there, which is like Babu, you mentioned, they're like smaller companies, but even like a few billion-dollar companies that I worked with, a number of those companies, which are maybe 5 or 10 billion range or less. It's a big chunk of business which is out there, and I've not seen programs where they have adopted data science programs or they have established organizations as GM. So my question to Brett is that maybe if you might want to comment on this in general, why there's such a huge disparity. And the second part question is that how can you maybe relate your experience when you started the program maybe 10 years ago at GM or 15 years ago, this data program, and how did you convince the organization? So two questions in this part.
Well, the first part of the question, I think, Norman, I think about, what we've been calling analytics hesitancy, right? And you think about the reluctance of leadership, senior leaders to get firmly behind, the potential of an analytics or data science-based solution to a particular problem or a particular business objective that they're trying to pursue. Some of that, is founded on what you might think of as their past experience. So if you think of senior leaders, this is my observation, and I've seen some hard examples of this as well, who have risen in the ranks of companies based on their own experience, their own intuition, their own ability to understand the market and to drive business decisions that are sound. It's been the foundation of their personal success and the success of their organization. Or pick a number, 20 years, 30 years in some cases. And it's very difficult to sit with those leaders and help them reorient to, hey, I can't make a decision based on my intuition alone. I need to have that decision supported by data, and let alone, a machine learning algorithm that is starting to make decisions for you and be much more predictive of outcomes that you should take on and prescriptive of actions you should take on. It's a tough leap for people to make, right? I think often we underestimate the change management aspects of that shift for leadership. And I can point to a particular example where, without getting too much into the details, we sat with a senior leader and said, look, if you go back and look at the data over the last year, a different decision path would have led to tens of millions of dollars of additional profit. And his first reaction was, the data must be wrong. His second reaction is, the data must be wrong. And I think it was his third reaction by the time we got through it was, okay, maybe the data is right, but something else is wrong. So it was a journey, right? And I think the journey is something that we need to think more overtly about and plan more for, right? And if you go back to your second part of the question, it was around 2012 when we launched the whole, at the time we called it a data warehousing program. I'll be frank, we had the luxury of a global CIO who was a huge proponent and who was firmly behind this. So that made our job a lot easier. And he sponsored the program and invested in the seed money required to build the team and to stand up the infrastructure. And then it was really started off as the best way I can describe it, if you build it, they will come sort of approach, right? So you had to demonstrate and earn credibility and earn trust. And it was one small solution and another, and something a little more, a little more profound. And then we had this inflection point that we talked about a couple of webinars ago with the vehicle safety challenges, with the ignition switch that had happened even prior to that, and at GM. And there was this sort of profound recognition that the data is and the use of data and having that cross-functional perspective was extraordinarily valuable, not only to us for efficiency and revenue generation or profit improvement, but for the actual safety of our customers is the one thing we value more than anything else. And that became a leading use case that we pointed to in a lot of meetings and other cases that you say, look, it's going on over here in vehicle safety analytics. Here are the things that are possible. And then it builds, right? And it's momentum. But like you said, it's been nearly 10 years. So it takes time, and business conditions today don't lend themselves to a whole lot of patience, to be honest. So that's another competing pressure point.
So I think the conclusion, the key points I'm gathering here is, it's not the technical issues that is predominantly causing this failure to deliver value, is the other side, which is the behavioral issue, the leadership support, the change management side, that is causing this failure to deliver value. Do you guys agree with this?
I would say, no, depending on the nature of the problem and the type of analytics we're dealing with. See, if we are talking about simple descriptive analytics, like how did I run my plant yesterday? How are my products doing in the marketplace, this past quarter? Things of that sort. The technical challenges are not that significant. But if we are talking about, like for example, yesterday, the discussion with the chairman of Foxconn, talking about setting up that facility in Wisconsin, and given the high wage market that they're dealing with in the US in comparison with, say, China or Taiwan, he talked about the need to develop solutions that required 90% less workforce very different kind of a challenge. And that's where technology will play an important role. And there are a lot of challenges associated with developing those kinds of solutions and make sure that the lines would be working day and night and things of that sort. So depending on the type of analytics, when you're pursuing very advanced analytics programs, there are still technical challenges as well. But generally speaking, it's, I would say, yes, it is a change management, it is a, cultural problem, it is leadership support, it is being comfortable, right? Letting data provide, decision support.
All right. So just building upon this, you said the word that building this credibility. Yes. So let me talk to Nabil about how do you build credibility, and what are the things that we need to do to build credibility for this program?
Yeah, and I think that is a key question, right? And I think many organizations struggle with this question. And to me, the one key answer or one possible answer is start with truly identifying the identity of your analytics team, right? And I think establishing a strong identity will help align people within the analytics team, help align people between the analytics team and the business. And from my own experience, and one thing that I think I've implemented successfully in various settings is really to adopt the identity of a physician, right? To become a trusted physician, there are some practices that you need to implement. And so if you go to a physician and you're suffering from some kind of a problem, the physician will listen very carefully to the problem and the symptoms, but also they will not accept your story, if you will, blindly. So what they do, they run their own investigations, their own tests, both quantitative and qualitative, to understand more insights or to develop more insights into the problem. And I often see analytical organizations just kind of get the data very quickly and start playing with it and generating models instead of focusing more on truly understanding the business problem. The other thing that physicians do well is that they are really good interviewers. We don't tend to think about physicians as good interviewers, but it is a skill. It is something that can be developed. It's a capability that demonstrates, if you do it very well, a genuine care and focus on a detailed understanding of the problem. And there are different kinds of questions that can be asked. You can ask fact-finding questions. You can ask feeling-finding questions. How do you feel about this problem versus what happened, right? So you're really trying to differentiate in your interviewing between different notions, between nuanced responses. You can ask questions about, well, what is a definition of success? How do others think about the problem? So you try to engage them. Physicians also provide advice on the best course of action. And they do that by educating their patients about possible outcomes, in particular when advice is not followed, right? And so that's another role that analytics organizations need to adopt in a big way. And then they guide the patient and they prepare them for adjustments. If there is a life-altering condition, they help them prepare for that change. So the analogy here is that if now we're going to be making decisions differently, I mean, back to Brett's comment about there are people who have been making decisions for the last 25, 30 years. They rely on their intuition. So how do you guide them through a change that says, now, you know what, you need to rely more on the data and trust in the data? Physicians, they learn from each patient. So there is a need in analytics to be humble enough to be patient from to understand and learn from the patients, to learn from other professionals in the field. Data science has become so diverse and there are so many different techniques. It's impossible for one person or even one team to actually be able to be proficient in all of these techniques. So just like a physician will rely on an expert in, I know, gastrology or whatever, there is a need for analytics to adopt a similar collaborative approach when solving problems. And then there's a focus on prevention that they need to focus on. And that means building those relationships with the patients. And at the end of the day, we all know this. We have doctors that we trust and doctors that we don't, and we have to think about what makes a doctor trustworthy, right? And so those are, in my mind, some of the key practices that really provide this notion of an identity that is wrapped around working like a physician.
Nabil, the first time I heard you, oops, I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
Nabil, the first time I heard you talk about that whole analogy, I thought it was fascinating, right? I love it because it has so much, we all have experience with physicians, right? Hopefully less than more, but we all have those experiences and it applies so directly. And, the other thing that crosses my mind about building credibility, and we've talked about this, I think, in a past webinar as well, but I can't understate the importance of, or overemphasize the importance of the accuracy of the data that's underpinning all of this, right? In terms of building credibility, if you don't have accurate, complete, high quality data, any trust is very hard earned. And it can actually lead to really poor decisions and poor business outcomes. And, trust is a funny thing, right? It's hard earned and quickly lost. And so, a focus on the accuracy of the data is really important. And to Nabil's point, right, that's part of the discovery process and really part of learning about the business conditions and making sure that you're thinking about data accuracy along the way. Right?
That's excellent points. One thing from my side about building trust is these small wins and having these small wins also not only build this trust, but also create this momentum. So if there's a journey that you have to take, think about maybe breaking down this journey into small bites, and then to work one bite at a time, publicize, communicate those wins, and then build that trust. It has worked well in my projects, and I think it's a lot of people have talked about this as well.
Yeah, that's a great point, right? I think it's well understood the iterative nature of these types of projects. And, while we talk about projects failing and failing to deliver to value potential, delivering to value potential is not a discrete destination. And, incrementally approaching this and delivering value along the way is the right way to build trust and confidence. It's not a practice that's well suited for a waterfall mentality, in my view, right? Hence the circular nature of what Nabil was talking about earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is a great point because, again, giving the analogy of a physician, if the focus of the physician is on prevention and sustaining long-term health and quality of life in general, you have to treat patients as part of a relationship, and this is not a transaction, right? So you're quite right. I mean, I think both of your comments really lead to that notion that analytics is more of a product than a project because it's ongoing. To your point, Brett, the comment about the data accuracy is never complete, right? There are always challenges. So you always have to keep working on it, right? And keep demonstrating that you're improving that state. And Norman, you're right. It's about improvements, because as a patient, if I'm not seeing any improvements, I'm going to go to another doctor, right? I'm not going to be very patient. Yeah, absolutely. So those are key points.
Fully agree. Fully agree. Babu, this data analytic program, there's a process behind. But you have tons of experience in this area. You worked with many companies. What are the key enablers in conquering this last mile?
Great question, Naman. And some of it, Nabil hinted at many of these requirements on the previous slide. It has to start with truly understanding what the problem is, right? And just the way the patient has to be in the driver's seat, not the doctor assuming that he knows what is it that the patient needs. So same thing when we're talking about analytics, we first and foremost need to truly understand what is the problem, facing the client, right? Complete understanding for the complexity, the nuances. Again, as I said earlier, it's not about developing a solution that works good on a good day, right? It has to work well every day, right? Or at least gracefully degrade when the circumstances change. So that demands that we really build a very strong partnership. The solution development has to be joint solution development. Often the data scientists don't have good understanding for the complexities of their business, right? So that ability to partner with the client, tapping into their wealth of experience, knowledge about how things actually work, what are the dynamics. Some of it is tacit knowledge, some of it is formal knowledge, but without that partnership, right? Taking the data, and trying to develop a solution never works, right? Unless we're talking about a very trivial problem, right? But in general, when we're talking about important decisions and things of that sort, it is this joint development, I would say, is the most important requirement. The client has to be feeling that they are an equal partner in the solution development. And that would also improve the odds of adoption, because they have a vested interest from day one. They're involved, they're talking to you, you are, so that I would say is one of the fundamental requirements for making these analytic projects successful.
Oh, thank you. Brad, your thoughts on this key enablers?
I think it's an interesting point, right? And it's like the third point from the bottom here that I think about often. Understanding how these analytics projects impact people, how they work, and how they relate to their roles within the organization. An organization is an organism that's constantly moving, changing, and evolving. And if you want to be successful and, getting to the last mile, and if you think about the iterative nature, any particular analytics program is going to have several last miles along its way, right? Where you start to get to value enablement and value achievement. If you don't understand how the changes in process and practice will affect the people that are involved, what you'll often run into is resistance. Resistance to consider the solution, resistance to provide the data, and that can undermine even the best ideas and the greatest technical infrastructure, and even some of the best machine learning algorithms that spit out the right, the right insights to be harvested to drive value. If people aren't engaged in the practices and processes, you're going to struggle. And so you have to really look around, because in almost all cases that I've seen, any profound value delivery comes with equally profound change for an organization. And if you haven't contemplated that, and it's a soft side, right? As a technical person and a technician, it's not something that we're often good at, is understanding the human element of this. And, it's a human organization, and you have to figure out how to manage that, right? To the point, Dr. Chinnan was making earlier, if you're running factories with 90% less people, and, what is the human impact on a change like that, and you have to think carefully about that and consider that as you plan these efforts out, right? And reevaluate continuously. That's one of the things that I've learned along the way that is, I say the challenges associated with that are often underestimated.
Right. One thing, this is a question for Nabil. In my experience, and for the last 20 years, I've been involved with change management and programs where we change companies, when we put improvement projects in place in companies, and the people know that they need these improvements. They need to change. They need to improve their margins. They need to improve the revenues. But still, they don't feel an alignment of these programs with the overall company strategy or the company objectives. For example, if GM said, okay, for us to grow, we need to improve our revenue or our margins by X%. How do you connect that data point to this data analytics strategy? And Nabil, what are you doing to connect these two thoughts? Because for me, it's so important for people to understand that how this project is going to connect to the company strategy.
Yeah, I mean, that is probably one of the toughest challenges, right? And I would argue that oftentimes, and again, and this is based on my own experience, so others could have probably different perspectives on this. I don't think that there is necessarily a complete understanding of the business need, right? And so we tend to look at it as a fixed point, but in reality, it is a moving target, and we never put in place the processes or set the expectations to deal with that. So if you think about data science projects or products, they are generally characterized by uncertain requirements, based on changing business needs, right? And the environment we live in is in constant flux. And so I think that the problem is that we tend to want to adhere to a static plan that does not necessarily provide value when the business reality changes. And so to me, the return on investment and that goal that businesses want to try to achieve is more of a process than just a control metric or maybe an absolute targeted value. So if we agree that the value of analytics in its use, not in its deployment, then we need value in use measures. So I think today we probably have the wrong measures. We have measures that talk about deployment versus usage, right? So I think there's got to be a shift. And, as human beings, we tend to measure what's easy to measure. We tend to measure where we have data, right? And so usage data is not necessarily easy to obtain, but I think it's something we need to focus on. In the process, as you're implementing a project, if there are some good ideas that come up, well, you know what? Implement them very quickly. I mean, back to Brett's point, you've got to be very nimble, very agile, and a waterfall approach is not going to work. So implement those ideas very quickly as opposed to taking too much time to develop and perfect the idea or the plan, right? Plans don't accomplish anything if there isn't action associated with them and learning. And so, and it's funny and sad in a way, because oftentimes you see the way we manage an analytical project, we try to explain the discrepancy between the plan and actuals, as opposed to focusing on what we've learned, right, and keep on adjusting. right? And as if the plan is the absolute truth, and which is obviously not. So I think, to me, those are some key ideas we can keep in mind as we focus on really bridging this gap and creating better value.
Right.
Also, maybe one last point related to this is that we, as an analytical community, maybe we're part of the problem because we tend to anchor problems around data. So in other words, we tend to try to find a purpose for the data that is available, as opposed to finding data for a purpose, right? So if you start from the premise that you need to find data for purpose, you really start focusing on what are the decisions that need to be made. And it helps you focus on what is unknown as opposed to what is known, right? Because we love data, so we go and focus on what data is available. So I think there's got to be a shift in perspective also from the analytics community about focusing on what is unknown, and really kind of helping the stakeholders focus on how will you be making different decisions in the future, right? And that is key.
Got it.
Nabil, just a follow-up thought, and something you said along the way there about the agility and being nimble in terms of the business and so on. It reminded me of one of the things that I've recently learned more about is the concept of a learning organization and a continuous learning organization. And one of the principles revolves around this notion of intelligent fast failure. And there are other names for it, but it's like working quickly in an agile way and working off of minimally viable products to confirm that you're on the right track and that you're, with key stakeholders, that you're going to, you're heading in the right direction to solve the challenges or to meet the objectives that they have in mind. And that also is very important because your point about the moving target, I've often seen projects moving slowly in the analytics area, and they start off trying to answer particular questions or address particular business problem. By the time they get to what they think is a suitable solution, the problem is gone, or the business stakeholders have moved on to the next problem, and the original problem has been deprioritized. Maybe it's still relevant, but it's not where their focus is. And that's a fatal flaw for analytics projects, really, in a lot of ways, if you can't move quickly to keep up with the changing business circumstances. So, we're starting to anchor more on this concept of minimally viable products, frequent confirmation of value and direction, and don't get too entrenched in a solution. If it's not hitting the mark, move on to the next path. Because sometimes, and I've been there in my career as well, you put your heart and soul into something and it's your baby, and you don't want anybody calling your baby ugly or non-value add or whatever. And it's easy to get entrenched in that mindset when it's smarter just to move on, right?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely, Brad. I think, just to build on your thoughts, to me, any good analytical project that I've been through, we ended up enhancing, call it modifying the business problem. So the business problem never remains intact by the end of the project. And, oftentimes we tend to think about it as being static. And so the context, starting with the context, back to building bridges, Norman, I think, what do we mean by context, right? So, it is about understanding the constraints, right, that are imposed by the business. So if a solution is provided and it should not cost more $100,000, well, that needs to be understood up front. So constraint is a key element. And then assumptions. What are those statements that relate to the project that are considered to be true in the absence of data, right? And so you really got to be able to list these assumptions and keep them very visible, keep adjusting them, and keep them the center of a dialogue between analytics and the business. And then limitations. what are some constraints, if you will, around capabilities? And for example, it could be that we don't have enough data or the right type of data we need, or back to Brett's point, the quality of the data is not where it needs to be. So to me, constraints, assumptions, and limitations, as simple as they are, they're not necessarily made implicit. Back to Dr. Chinham's notion of a tacit knowledge. There's so much knowledge that we have to document and keep visible in terms of constraints, assumptions, and limitations.
I think good point, Babu. In terms of just building on Nabil's point about capability is a key issue among organizations, and one of the roadblocks from people to move in this direction. What are your thoughts about building capabilities, and maybe as a starting point, and how can you build this capability over time as well?
Sure, Naman. Great question. So in my mind, we can talk about the capabilities of the client organization, but I will for a second talk about the critical skills that are necessary in the analytics organization. Most of the talent that we can hire today for data science and analytics, they come with strong technical skills, but they lack any domain knowledge and often lack the necessary soft skills that are extremely important. What I have learned over the last 3 decades, working with many companies, small startups, big companies, multinational companies, is that those soft skills are extremely critical. This ability to hear what the real pain point is, right? I mean, I will be first to accept that in spite of decades of progress with machine learning and and technology infrastructure, the solutions are still very brittle, right? But we don't necessarily need the best algorithms. They will come over time, right? But what is a lot more important is, these soft skills of being able to engage the customer. Brett talked about minimum viable product. We don't need necessarily complex solutions, right? We want to facilitate more effective decisions. It's about, continuous improvement, right? Today, you primarily rely on instinct. I give you some data that might allow you to, improve your instincts and make better decisions, things of this sort. So cultivating those soft skills, within the data science organization. And Nabil talked about many of the requirements, right? The doctors, right? How they interview patients. So these skills are extremely important, and it is hard to find any new recruits that bring those kinds of skills. And a lot of these projects are likely to fail because they only know how to work with these technical tools, don't understand the complexities of the real world. So when we get to the last mile and making it successful, we have identified the requirements quite well, right? The client should be in the driver's seat, right? The solution has to be developed jointly because there is a lot of complexity to real world problems, and the data might not be necessary. Nabil talked about the assumptions that might be necessary to complement the data that you have, right? And the robustness of the solution. Again, not developing solutions that work on a good day, but has to, gracefully degrade if there are, changes in the business environment, things of the sort. So yeah, I would say cultivating these skills within the data science and analytics organization in their ability to build partnerships, build relationships, truly understand the needs of the customer, and joint solution development. These are fundamental requirements to be successful.
Got it. I think it's a good point. And the softer side is, I think, is a very key point that you brought up, Babu, that always that we kind of struggle with the softer side. While the technical side is a challenge, and most of the time we don't consider the softer side about the behaviors, about how we're going to present, and how our technical people are going to talk to people. And this whole process that Nabil described about the physician mindset, I think it kind of gave us a good idea to position ourselves and to conquer the softer side as well. So with this, I just want to maybe ask about some of the key takeaways. Maybe Brett, if you want to start, what are some of the key points in delivering the last mile from your perspective?
And Norman, I'm going to start with the very first one, actually. And, cultivating the right mindset. And that's a very broad statement, right? But it's so incredibly important, right? And today's talk has been a lot around the soft side and change management and so forth. But that right mindset includes things like openness at the senior management level, senior leaders being open-minded to maybe question their intuition-based assumptions and so forth. Having the right mindset that you look for data. I worked for a guy who I love this expression. He was very, very supportive of our analytics program, and he was always of the mindset, and he said he would repeat in meetings, in God we trust, all of these bring data, right? And it just kind of said it all for me in a lot of ways. And cultivating the right mindset to me also includes having that learning orientation, understanding that you may start with a particular challenge and you'll learn more, as Nabil had pointed out, and the cheese will move. The problem will change before you're done because you'll have more insights, and you might recognize that what you thought was the problem really wasn't the problem, and you go down an entirely new path. And so being able to do that, and do that with the right agility. And agility means an iterative nature to the process, but also means agility in terms of personal skill sets, in terms of developing relationships and trust with your key stakeholders. It means agility in your own personal decision making and your role in the team. So mindset is so super important, and it's contextual, right? Some organizations are good at parts of that, and some are more challenged at other parts of it. So think about that early and often, and never lose sight of how you continuously improve the soft side of the culture, the process, the business, the skill sets.
Right. I think from that perspective, the couple of thoughts just coming to my mind from the mindset standpoint is the growth mindset. That is so important at this time, especially for this, that we can grow, we can maybe learn, and we can move forward. The other one is from the mindset standpoint, in my view, is two things within the mindset. One is the effectiveness of the mindset or the direction of the mindset. So we need to set the direction first. And the second part is the efficiency or the speed. So the direction need to be first, and then we need to think about the speed. And a lot of times we're so focused on the speed and we don't even set the right direction. So that is one thing I think I've seen a lot within organizations, that, okay, day one, okay, when we're going to see this huge result from this project, speed, and we have not even picked up the problem or which way we're going to go. So that's something that from my perspective, Nabil, your thoughts?
I think, the one of the key challenge, Noman, is that we tend to think, an organization tend to kind of say, you know what, I want to develop analytical capabilities, and they want to get it right from day one. And it is a long journey, right? Just to kind of be very, very frank about this, it just doesn't happen overnight. Even if you purchase consulting resources, even if you get highly talented analytical professionals, it's still going to take a lot of time because, to your point, there's got to be alignment between the culture and what you're trying to do. To me, the direction, and oftentimes you don't have to be 100% right initially on the direction. Keep in mind that the direction will be informed by the analytics as well. So it is a feedback loop mechanism, right? but start somewhere. And I think oftentimes organizations are scared about starting somewhere or starting with a process or a project that isn't guaranteed to provide the full expected benefit. So I think it's an exercise in starting somewhere, recognizing that this is a journey. Keep aligning expectations. That's really very key, and really being very clear about the role of analytics. Do you see it as a support function, or do you see it as a function that's going to help you compete? And there's a big difference between the two, right? And so that mindset has to make this recognition very early on. Are you competing? Just to coin, what Tom Davenport said, are you competing on analytics, or is analytics a support function, right? And oftentimes there's this misalignment because the analytics team might think that they're the center, that the strategy is around analytics, but the business people might say, what? No, analytics is more of a support mechanism. So that there's a gap that needs to be reduced over time.
Got it, Nabil. Babu, from your side, closing comments.
Great comments from Nabil. Yourself, Noman. I mean, that last comment from Nabil is very profound. In some ways, it, I suppose, depends on the nature of the industry that you're in, right? Charles Fine talks about so-called clock speed. So in sectors with hyper competition, you have to compete on analytics. You have to compete on speed to make effective decisions and robust decisions. In industries where the competition is around, say, cost efficiencies and things of that sort. So it could be that the analytics should play a support role, right? Because, your competitive advantage, stems from, other areas of expertise. But the bottom line in all this, I believe, is that last mile success is often a cultural problem. Having the right culture within the data science and analytics organization, culture within the client organization, and and building strong partnerships and working towards continuous improvement.
Oh, thank you, Nabil, Brett, and Babu. Great presentation, great insights. With this, we're going to close the program. Our next program, which is the session number 7. So we have designed this program with 8 sessions. So this is the session number 7, and the topic is on operational excellence and resilience. So we look forward to see you in this program, and we wish you all the best. Thank you all.
Bye all.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Safe, everyone.